I used to think the way you prove love is by quietly doing the work nobody sees. You say yes to extra shifts, you leave early and come home late, you let your hands ache and your eyes burn because you want to hand the person you love something bigger than promises. That was the story I carried when I started skimming a little off every paycheck, when I opened a savings account she didn't know about, when I told myself that the right ring and the right house would make every small argument irrelevant. We'd stand in a doorway one day and I'd say, "This is ours," and all the tiredness would matter. Her name was Claire. 28, sharp as a tack, a marketing manager at a firm that loved buzzwords like activation and organic growth. She could sit across from a client who sold staplers and make it sound like a philosophy. She noticed details, chipped mugs, crooked photos, tags left on new coats. I loved that about her. She made the world feel arranged. I was 32, a site supervisor for a construction company that did schools and strip malls and, on good years, a few fancy houses on the hill. I spoke fluent tape measure and change order, lived with permanent dust in my shoes, and knew how to be the last one on a job when the lights wouldn't turn on. We met at a charity 5K neither of us wanted to run. Her company sponsored a table, my company built the stage. She came over to ask if we could move a speaker tower 10 inches, and I said we could move anything as long as someone brought me coffee. She came back with coffee and a half smile that stuck in my head for a week. 2 months later, we were dividing Netflix passwords and learning each other's breakfast habits. She put cinnamon on everything. I ate like a longshoreman at 6 a.m. By year 2, we could read each other's footsteps. She'd drop her bag by the door and say, "How was the punch list?" I'd kiss the top of her head and say, "How many rounds did you win with the client?" We were good in kitchens and aisles and car rides. She's the only person who ever made grocery shopping feel like a date. I started planning a proposal in the most unromantic way, a spreadsheet, rings, prices, jewelers, timing. There was a lookout point on the North Bluff where we'd watched a storm roll in once, laughing under a blanket while lightning stitched the horizon. I wanted to do it there, just us, some Sunday at dusk when the air tasted like rain. I also started looking at houses, not the fantasy listings Claire sent me, wraparound porches and 10-foot ceilings, but places I could actually afford with my overtime, little 2 bedrooms with honest kitchens and a yard big enough for the golden retriever she swore would force me to take lunch breaks. The overtime became a rhythm. I told her I was picking up extra because a school job fell behind. She wrinkled her nose at my hours and said, "Don't burn out, hero," in a way that felt like a compliment and a scolding. I kept the surprise in my pocket like a smooth stone. The secret felt sweet, then necessary, then heavy. The first crack wasn't even a fight. We were on the couch, and she was half watching a show and half typing something on her phone with that small smile people don't know they make when they're pleased. I said, "What's funny?" She said, "Oh, just a Slack thread," and tilted the screen away without meaning to. Later that week, a new name started popping up in her stories, Daniel. First as a joke, Daniel made the world's worst deck. Then as an eye roll, Daniel thinks we can hit Q3 targets by manifesting. Then as a compliment, okay, Daniel might actually be a wizard with clients. I filed him under work friend and told myself not to be a cliche. We drove out to look at leaves one Sunday in October. She took photos out the window until her storage ran out. "We should live somewhere with trees like this," she said. "We do," I said. "You just need to leave your laptop sometimes." She laughed and leaned on my shoulder, and all the doubts I never said out loud quieted for a while. The break talk happened on a Wednesday, which offended me on a level I can't explain. Wednesdays are for leftovers and staying on top of laundry. They are not for detonations. She'd gone to the gym and come home pink-cheeked and damp hair twisted into a clip. I had my boots on, laces undone, the day still soaking into me. She stood in the kitchen and peeled the label off a bottle of mineral water like the glue had insulted her. "I think I need space," she said, and my heart found the floor. Space from what? Me? Us? I tried to keep my voice gentle, like there was a tone that would make this thing less true. She met my eyes for 1 second and then looked away. "I don't feel seen. You're always tired. We're roommates with shared calendars, and there's this guy at work, and it made me realize." She stopped. The room hummed. "It made you realize what?" My voice was calm. It felt like someone else had borrowed it. "That I've been lonely," she said. "His name is Daniel. Nothing happened, I swear. But talking to him felt easy, and I can't remember the last time we felt easy." There's a particular dignity in not begging. I didn't cry or point to the spreadsheet she would never see. I didn't tell her about the ring catalog open in a private tab or the escrow calculator on my phone. I took a breath that tasted like metal and said, "If space is what you need, take it." She nodded, surprised that I wasn't giving her the scene maybe she thought she deserved. I took a blanket to the couch that night and learned the architecture of our ceiling in the dark. In the morning, I made coffee, poured it out, and went to work early because the only thing that made sense was moving steel and numbers where you put them, and they stayed. A week of space stretched like gum. She stayed at her sister's 2 nights, came home the third with a bag she didn't unpack, then left again after we ate in silence like the food was a meeting we had to attend. The name Daniel vanished from her mouth completely, which is when my stomach started living up higher in my ribs. I didn't go hunting through her phone in the beginning. I wish I could say I never did, but I'm not going to polish this. It was her laptop that betrayed her, not me. A text came through on her screen while she was showering because she'd set messages to Mirror. The preview said, "You were incredible today." The kind of calm that came over me scared me. I sat down, hands steady, and opened the thread. It was Daniel. It wasn't pornographic. That almost made it worse. Inside jokes, tiny intimacies, the kind of dailiness you build a life on. A photo of a coffee he'd left on her desk with a note, "Knock 'em dead." A selfie of them in an Uber after a client happy hour, cheek to cheek, the caption not even flirty, "We killed it." But the tone. God, the tone. It was the sound of something they hadn't done yet but were doing anyway. I closed the laptop, sat very still, and decided to be a person I wouldn't hate later. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, steam following her like a cape, I said, "Are you seeing him?" Her eyes widened and then did this tiny, practiced softening that felt like a curtain drop. "No, I told you, we're just close." "Do you want to be with him?" I asked. She flinched like I'd reached out and touched a bruise. "I don't know what I want." "That answer will rot you if you let it." I nodded like we were colleagues, and I went to the bedroom and slept for 4 hours in my clothes, and then I woke to the sound of her leaving. People talk about gut feelings like weather. Mine turned into climate. I stopped recognizing the way she moved in our space. My friends noticed the hollow in my jokes. My sister Meg sent me a 3-word text. "You okay, really?" I said. "Sure, with 2 E's because I'm allergic to pity." The truth fell into my lap from a direction I didn't expect. Lisa, an account manager at Claire's firm and the closest thing Claire had to a work friend I liked, pulled me aside at a mutual friend's birthday. "I'm not trying to blow up your life," she said, "but are you two good?" Her face did that thing people's faces do when they care about you and wish they didn't have information. "We're on a break," I said, present tense like it wasn't a way of saying past. She chewed her lip. "Then you should know people at the office have noticed things. Her and Daniel, the way they leave together, the way they talk in a corner like nobody else exists. I wanted to believe it was just a project, but I don't know." I thanked her. I didn't drink the rest of the night. I lay in bed later, awake enough to hear my upstairs neighbor let their dog out at 2 a.m., and I decided 2 things. I would not yell, and I would not be the last person to know. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I reached out to a stranger whose life intersected mine by accident. I found Daniel's fiancée through a tagged engagement post, Marissa standing next to him in front of a barn dripping in lights, her hand on his chest, a ring throwing sparkles at the lens. Her profile was a scroll of bridal brunches and "can't wait to marry my best friend" captions. I stared at the screen long enough to feel creepy, then sent a message that made my hands sweat. "Hi, you don't know me. My name is Aaron. I think we need to talk about Daniel and Claire." She didn't see it for 2 days. When it lit up, seen, my heart tried to leave my body. She wrote back 4 hours later, "Can we meet somewhere public?" I said yes and named a coffee shop with big windows. Marissa looked exactly like her photos until she didn't. Online, she was all angles and outfits. In person, she was a person, nervous, trying to keep her dignity wrapped tight against the draft. She came alone, no friend for backup, which told me something about her. We sat at a tiny table with our knees almost touching, and I put my phone between us like a peace offering. "I'm not here to be dramatic," I said. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm just trying not to live in a story someone else wrote." She nodded. "I think I know," she said. "I've felt it, but I need to see it." I showed her the messages, not the worst of it, the dailiness, the part where Claire told him, "Couldn't have gotten through today without you," the photo of 2 wine glasses on a hotel bar with the caption, "To small victories at 10:47 p.m. on a Tuesday." She told me she was sleeping at her sister's because she had an early meeting nearby. Marissa's face didn't crumple the way people imagine. It hardened, then went blank. She slid her phone out and showed me receipts, expenses in his Apple Wallet labeled "Client Dinner" at the same hotel I'd just shown her. a photo she'd found in his trash folder of a necklace she didn't own laid on a marble countertop. A calendar screenshot where rehearsal dinner tasting got moved 3 times in 1 week for urgent pitch. We sat there for a long time without talking, 2 strangers in a weird little army of 2. The anger that finally came wasn't hot, it was clean. We agreed on a rule right then: no screaming, no scenes that make us into the problem, no violence, no Reddit posts with names. Just the truth. The people who needed it would get it. I started building a file because that's what I know how to do: gather, label, assemble. Screenshots with timestamps, a folder of call logs, a note of dates she told me she was with Lisa that matched client dinners on his feed. I didn't hack anything or go through her drawers. The universe coughed up enough because cheaters are busy people. They forget that metadata exists. I confronted Claire again because fairness felt like a muscle I still wanted to use. We met at a cafe near her office. She looked like she hadn't been sleeping. I did not feel sorry for that. She reached for my hand across the table and said my name like a question. "Did you sleep with him?" I asked, not loud, not unkind, just cutting to the part that matters. She flinched, then straightened, like a person who'd rehearsed half a truth and had to take on the rest. "Once," she said, and then, to her credit or shame, added, "twice." It is a strange mercy to have your suspicions confirmed. Reality is cold, but you can touch it. I nodded once and let the silence do the work. She started talking like she had to fill it, about how she felt lonely, how Daniel made her feel seen, how she'd panicked when she thought maybe what we had was turning into routine. She apologized with a careful mouth. She said she didn't want to lose me while keeping a finger on the door behind her in case it stayed open. I listened like I was interviewing a witness. "Marissa knows," I said when she finished, and her face drained out. "You told her?" "She deserved to decide her life with the facts," I said. "Same as me." She asked what I wanted. I told her I didn't know and that this didn't feel like a negotiation she got to chair. Then I paid for my coffee and left because walking away is sometimes the only thing you can do that says the thing you mean. The next 72 hours were a small hurricane that only hit 2 houses. Marissa called me that night from her car. I could hear traffic and breathing. "I confronted him," she said. "He denied until I showed him the receipts, and then he tried to say it didn't mean anything. He begged me not to tell my parents because it would kill my mom. He begged me not to cancel the wedding because what would people think?" "What do you think?" I asked. "That I'm not marrying a man who scares me more than he loves me," she said. "I'm calling the venue in the morning." By lunch, the cancellation was real. Deposits gone, vendors called, the group text of bridesmaids broken into. "I love you. I'm here. I knew something was weird. I knew something was weird. I'm sorry." Daniel's mother called Marissa and asked if they could work it out like adults. Marissa, who had been a stranger 2 days ago and now felt like a teammate, said, "This is me working it out like an adult." She told me later that the silence on the other end felt like a door shutting softly. Claire stormed into my apartment that Friday, uninvited, cheeks flushed, eyes flint. For a second I thought she might throw something, but she just stood in the doorway like a weather system. "How could you do this to me?" she said. "To you?" I couldn't help it, I laughed. "You set the fire." I pulled the alarm. She said I'd ruined her reputation. I said she'd done that investment herself. She said I was punishing her for being human. I said sleeping with your coworker while you're engaged is a very specific kind of human and not one I want to be with. Then I asked her to leave. She kept talking. I opened the door wider and looked at it. Eventually, she understood that the conversation had ended an hour before it began. I thought that would be the clean break. It wasn't. The Monday after, rumors started curling through her office like smoke. Someone in accounts saw Claire and Daniel together at a hotel bar. Someone in creative heard Daniel beg the HR manager for discretion. Someone in strategy posted a subtweet about people who bring drama into Q3. Claire texted me a screenshot of a group chat where her name got circled with a skull emoji and said, "This is what you wanted?" I put the phone face down and walked 3 loops around the block until I could trust my mouth not to say something that would poison me too. Marissa asked if she could share the folder I'd made with her parents. "They think I'm overreacting," she said, and there was something so heartbreakingly polite about the way she asked permission for her own evidence that I told her to do whatever she needed. An hour later, her dad called me from a number I didn't recognize, introduced himself like he was shaking a hand, and said, "Thank you for telling my daughter the truth when my future son-in-law wouldn't." I said I was sorry it had to be like this. He said, "Me too. But better now than when there are kids who have to learn the vocabulary of heartbreak before they learn to read." Claire's sister texted me one sentence, I don't like what she did to you, but I also don't like what you're doing now. I typed and deleted 3 drafts that started with actually and ended with nothing. In the end, I wrote, I understand. I didn't send her the photos. I didn't recruit her to my side. I took a shower and scrubbed until my skin felt new and knew it wasn't. Daniel tried to control the damage at work. Lisa called me 2 days later and told me he'd requested a meeting with HR to clarify the narrative, like cheating was a press release. By then, though, the story had outrun him. An anonymous email had gone out to a small list. His manager, HR, 2 executives with a link to a folder and a note that said, "This is what happens when you mistake the office for a dating app." I didn't send it, and neither did Marissa. The world had grown extra hands. The world had grown extra hands. I learned that when the truth breaks, it doesn't pick a schedule. Marissa texted me at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. He's at my parents' house right now. He brought flowers and a letter from my dad. I told her to call the police if she felt unsafe and then sat on my couch in the dark with my phone in my palm like a little animal until she wrote back, "He left. We're okay," he cried. So did my mom. They still said no. I kept working because work lets a person keep their footing. I ran a job out by the highway where a new grocery store was going up, the kind with 20 kinds of olive oil and a sushi counter. I stood on the slab in the morning with a coffee, and the crew looked at me to tell them where to cut holes for conduits. It was a relief to be asked questions that had answers. At lunch, I sat in my truck and added 2 more screenshots to the folder, then closed it and opened a weather app, then closed that and stared out the windshield at a cloud that looked like a sail. Claire tried being sad after being mad didn't move me. She called from an unknown number, voice soft, saying she'd made a mistake and that she was willing to do whatever it takes. I told her that whatever it takes would have included not doing it. She said she'd go to counseling. I said I already was, the kind that doesn't try to convince you that your wound is a lesson you needed. She said people would talk about her. I said people always talk about something, and this time they had material. She said she never planned to fall for someone else. She said she never planned to fall for someone else. I said most falls are not on calendars. Marissa and I stayed in contact because crisis makes weird little bridges. We weren't friends, not exactly. We were each other's alibis for reality. She told me when the venue refused to refund and when her aunt offered to host a healing luncheon that sounded like a nightmare, and when she changed her flight for the honeymoon to a trip with her sister because she deserved a beach even if the reason changed. I told her when Claire left a box of my things by the door like a warning sign, when I found one of Claire's earrings under a dresser and laughed like a man who had almost drowned when I started sleeping again. The company where they worked moved fast once the right people had the right documents. HR interviewed them separately. Their policy wasn't no office relationships, but it was no supervisor. Subordinate relationships, disclose conflicts, and don't lie when asked directly. They'd lied. Daniel's promotion went on hold. He got reassigned to a client who hated him. Claire got pulled off a campaign she loved and put on something with fewer eyes. She called me to say, "Are you happy?" Like my satisfaction was the point. I said, "I'm done being a witness to your own consequences," and then I blocked the new number too. There was still one thread dangling, the one neither Marissa nor I wanted to leave to rumor. Daniel's family was clutching narrative like a rosary. Boys make mistakes. Cold feet, pressure, the wedding stress got into his head. Marissa wanted to look his mother in the eye and say, "Your son made a series of choices." She also wanted to be kind, which was almost more impressive. She asked me to be there, not in the room, but nearby. "Just in case I need someone who believes me," she said. I said yes. It wasn't chivalry, it was mutual aid. We met his parents at their house on a Sunday in a suburb where the mailboxes matched. I parked 2 houses down and texted, "I'm here." She walked up the flagstone path in a navy dress and flats, hair pulled back like she meant business. He opened the door and tried a smile. She didn't give him one back. I watched his mother's face when Marissa sat at their kitchen table and, with a voice that didn't tremble, laid out dates and times, showed screenshots, and said she wouldn't be marrying their son. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Daniel's shoulders fold in and his mother's hand go to her mouth, and I knew that some stories only end when the audience refuses to clap. After, Marissa texted, "It's done. Thank you." I sat in my truck and let my head drop back against the headrest and breathed until there was air again. You would think that would be enough for a first act, but liars try one more rewrite before the credits. Claire invited me to what she called a conversation with no agenda. I almost said no, but I promised myself I'd do one last adult thing before I closed the book, listen, and then leave. We met at a park with a lake and geese that looked like they were plotting. She wore the sweater I bought her last winter. She said she still wore it because it was warm. I did not tell her that wasn't a compliment. "I miss us," she said. "I miss the way you made things feel safe." "I miss that too," I said, honest, because lying anymore would have been an insult to both of us. "I also missed the version of you who didn't sleep with someone at the first sign of boredom." She winced like I'd struck her. "It wasn't boredom." "Then it was worse," I said. She apologized again, the long kind. She said she had told Daniel it was over, which sounded like she'd just discovered matches are hot. She said she wanted to try to rebuild what we had. "What we had is what made you do what you did," I said. "I want something that doesn't require me to become impossible to leave." She cried. I stood there and didn't hold her because you can love a person and still decide not to be their pillow. She asked me what happened next. I told her I didn't know, which is different than I don't care. She asked if I would keep what happened between us. I said I hadn't blasted it to the world and didn't intend to, but I wouldn't protect her from her own choices. Then I said goodbye, which is a small word that can carry a whole life. When I got home, the Ring catalog in the private tab stared at me like a joke from an unfunny god. I closed it. I opened a rental site and looked at apartments in a different city I'd talked about like a fantasy, a place with hills and music and a river that made people slower. I didn't decide that night. I only let the idea sit on the counter like a set of keys. They say you can't outrun pain, you can only outgrow the version of yourself that keeps inviting it to dinner. I started cleaning my apartment like I was moving, even though I wasn't yet. I bought boxes, I wrapped glasses in old t-shirts. I took the photos off the fridge and looked at my life without magnets and told myself I would be okay even if nobody put anything back. A week later, Marissa texted me one line that made me sit down. His sister sent me a message. She said she's glad I told the truth. She said Daniel needs to learn. I typed, "That doesn't make it hurt less," and she wrote back, "It makes it hurt cleaner." She sent me a picture from the beach she went to instead of her honeymoon, her feet in the sand and a paperback balanced on her thigh, and for the first time in weeks I felt something like relief reach me all the way down. Claire and Daniel still worked together, but not together. That was their punishment, the office without the fling, the glances, the meetings like crime scenes. Someone told me Daniel had been removed from 2 accounts and Claire from 1. Someone told me HR had updated the handbook. Someone always tells someone something. I kept my head down and my hands busy and waited for the itch under my skin to become a decision. I told my boss I might be open to a transfer if the right one came up. He said, "You want mountains or ocean?" And I said, "Fewer ghosts." And he laughed and said, "Everybody wants that." 2 days later, he forwarded me a posting in a branch 3 states away. It wasn't a promotion, just a clean slate. I printed it and put it on the kitchen counter where the Ring catalog had been. It looked like a different kind of promise. On the night I finally chose, it was quiet. No big moment, no song on the radio telling me to go. I just stood in my living room surrounded by half-filled boxes and realized I didn't owe this city another minute of watching me bleed. I opened my laptop and wrote an email to HR at my company and another to my landlord and another to my sister. Then I wrote one more to Marissa because she had been the only other person who knew the shape of this particular storm. I wrote, "I think I'm leaving." She wrote back, "I already did, different way. I think you'll be happier when your roots don't drive by memories." The last thing I did before I started telling people was finish the file. Not to send to anyone else, but to put a period on the sentence. I added a final note, "Timeline closed." Then I dragged it to an external drive and put the drive in a drawer I would pack last. It wasn't about keeping ammunition, it was about not pretending none of it had happened. The day before I gave notice, I stopped by the North Bluff where I'd once imagined the Ring and the blanket and the storm. The view was the same. The place inside me that wanted it had changed. I stood there with my hands in my pockets and let the wind slap my cheeks and thought, I wanted to bring you here to promise everything. I'm bringing myself here to promise something else, not to carry you where you can't go. When I got back to my truck, there was a message from Lisa. HR asked if I'd speak in a training about boundaries. I snorted. The world is ridiculous. Then I wrote back, "Tell them to pay you for your pain." She sent a laughing emoji and then a heart. I drove home and put another plate in a box. I labeled the box "Kitchen Heavy" and smiled because that was true about more than dishes. I didn't plan a grand confrontation for my last act in that city. Drama had eaten enough of my time. But life has a way of delivering a stage even when you don't order one. 2 days after I secured the transfer, and one day before I was going to tell Claire I was moving, an evite landed in my inbox by accident. It was to a combined birthday and engagement party for a mutual friend of hers from college. Daniel was listed as Marissa's fiancé because nobody had updated the host list. The party would be at a rooftop bar downtown. The thought of them in a room together pretending to be good people made my teeth hurt. I stared at the screen and felt the old heat rise and then pass. I wasn't going to walk in and flip tables, but I was going to make sure the last people still clinging to an old story didn't get to live in it for free. I sent one message to the friend hosting, the only one in that circle I trusted to do the right thing. I wrote, "I think your guest list is wrong." And then, because truth sometimes needs a little help moving, I attached a single screenshot with names blurred except the two that mattered, and a date stamp that made the rest of the invites into fiction. 5 minutes later, she called me, voice sharp. "Is this real?" "Yes," I said. "I'm not trying to humiliate anyone. I just want you not to serve cake to a lie." She was quiet, then said, "Thank you." I said, "Please leave my name out of it," and she promised. That night, while I was wrapping a set of bowls in newspaper, my phone buzzed with a flurry of messages I didn't open. I didn't need to. I could feel the story moving through the pipes. Claire finally texted one more time from a number I hadn't blocked yet. "You did this." I wrote back the last sentence I would ever send her. No choices did. The next morning, I signed the transfer papers. I packed the last box in my bedroom. I took the photo strips off the inside of the closet door and put them in an envelope labeled "Passed." I taped everything shut and stacked it by the door where my boots would go. And for the first time since the day she said space, I felt like I was standing on something that would hold. The night before I left the city, I drove past the office where Claire worked. I didn't stop. I just wanted to see the building one last time, the glass lobby glowing like it held something holy. In reality, it held cubicles and bad coffee and the wreckage of people who couldn't keep their promises. I thought about how many times I had parked out front waiting to pick her up after late meetings. How many times I'd watched her walk out with her hair shining under the street lamps, smiling like she couldn't wait to tell me about her day. It felt like remembering someone else's life. I loaded up my truck that morning, boxes stacked like bricks in the bed, the duffel bag riding shotgun. I didn't tell Claire I was leaving. I didn't want some last-minute plea or a fight. I wanted silence, so I got it. The drive to the new city was 8 hours of broken radio signals, gas station coffee, and the kind of thinking you can't do when you're standing still. I kept waiting for grief to catch up, but it never did. It was like I'd already drained the tank dry, and all that was left was the space to breathe. The apartment I rented was small, one-bedroom, slanted ceilings, cracked tile in the bathroom. But it was mine. I dragged in the boxes, ate a burger on the floor, and slept like I hadn't in months. Work at the new branch was a different world. The manager, a guy named Cole, had a laugh that filled the warehouse. The crew looked at me like I was just another body until I fixed a scheduling mess in under an hour. After that, they started calling me Captain, half-jokingly. I built trust with results, and soon I was the one they came to when things went wrong. I set routines. Sunday mornings I ran by the river. Tuesday nights I bowled with the guys from work. Thursdays I cooked dinner with whatever Ms. Alvarez, my elderly neighbor, left at my door in Tupperware. My life stopped being about watching someone else's moods and started being about mine. Claire tried reaching out in the early months. A text from a new number. "I miss you." A voicemail. "Please, can we talk?" I deleted them without responding. Marissa once sent me an update that Daniel had been let go from the company after HR finally got enough complaints, that Claire was demoted and barely hanging on. I didn't celebrate, but I didn't feel bad either. Some fires burn themselves out. 6 months in, Cole called me into his office. "Ops manager is retiring," he said. "I want you in the chair." I stared at him. "You're serious?" "You've got steady hands," he said. "This place needs that." I took the job. For the first time, I had a title that felt like proof of all those late nights and long hours. And I'd earned it without sacrificing myself for someone else's dream. Life moved forward, slowly, steadily, like bricks laid one on top of the other. I even went on a few dates. Nothing serious, but enough to remind me I could laugh with someone new. Enough to remind me I wasn't broken. Then, a year to the week after I left, fate threw me one last test. I was walking through the farmer's market downtown when I heard a laugh that froze me in place. Not because I wanted it, because I recognized it. I turned and saw Claire standing by a booth holding a cup of coffee, talking to a friend. She looked smaller somehow, like the shine had been rubbed off her, but it was her. She saw me at the same time. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she smiled like old times. Then she walked over. "Aaron," she said, voice trembling. "Claire!" She bit her lip. "I didn't know you lived here." "I do." My tone was flat, calm. "How are you?" she asked, searching my face. "I'm good," I said, and it was true. I was steady, solid, a man with a new life. Her eyes welled up. "I've thought about you, about everything I ruined. Daniel's gone." He tried to crawl back to Marissa, but she shut the door on him. "My job? Well, you've probably heard. I lost most of my friends too. Everyone looks at me differently now." I didn't respond. I just waited. She swallowed hard. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. I ruined the best thing I ever had, and I'd give anything to take it back." For a moment, I felt the echo of old feelings, the memory of Sunday mornings with coffee and lazy smiles. But it was just that, a memory. The man who loved her like that didn't exist anymore. "I don't hate you," I said quietly, "but I don't need you in my life." Her tears spilled. "Please, can we just talk? Closure?" "I already have closure," I said. Then I stepped past her and kept walking. The air felt crisp, sharp, like the world had just handed me the final piece of proof I'd been waiting for, that I was free. That night, I sat on my balcony listening to the city hum and thought about how far I'd come. I wasn't the man who begged for scraps of love anymore. I wasn't the man who believed overwork could buy loyalty. I was a man with boundaries, with a future I built myself. Claire was just a face in a crowd now, a closed door on a street I didn't live on anymore. And me? I was finally home. So tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you have stopped to hear her out? Or would you have walked away like I did, finally at peace with the life you built for yourself? Leave your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more stories of betrayal, healing, and moving forward.